Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Daniela Castillo, and I am a vegan veterinarian. I am originally from Mexico, but I've been practicing in Los Angeles. I have my own company as Castillo Animal Vegan Vet. And this has been one of my dreams come true, interviewing other vegan veterinarians. The goals of this meeting is basically looking at the journeys of these amazing individuals and how their life is being as a veterinarian and as vegans. And I really want to outline these individuals and get to know each other, to grow our community, to show the world that vegan veterinarians are actually a thing where our community is growing every day. I personally would love to see the word vegan being spoken and more normal in our community, in our veterinary community. So I really wanna, I'm very happy to have you, Ingrid. Dr. Taylor is our ninth guest. And Dr. Taylor is a veterinarian with nearly 16 years of experience in general clinical and emergency practice, public health, and animal advocacy. She is an award-winning writer whose work has appeared in HuffPost, Sentient Media, the Southwest Review, and others. As a lead content creator at HazAdapt, she creates veterinary content that offers immediate, accessible instructions to people on how to keep their animals safe during disasters and emergencies. This is so amazing to have you here tonight. I am so excited to get to know you better. And, I haven't had the pleasure to meet you in person, but I am so happy that you accepted to join me and tell me about your personal journey and your life. I'm just going to go and jump to the first question so we can start this party. And I would like you to tell me, how was your experience in veterinary school? Was it hard? Was it easy, emotional? You can tell me some of the stories that really left a place, a mark in your heart.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me on to this evening, Daniela. And also congratulations on your ninth interview. That's amazing. So that's really great. So my experience in veterinary school, well, I went to veterinary school at this point, it was about 20 years ago. So it's been a while. And I think the good news is that some things have changed in veterinary school since I was there. And the bad news is that things have probably not changed. Things have not changed fast enough in veterinary school. So I think that my experience probably does still resonate with students who are going to veterinary school today. And I will say, for many years after going to veterinary school, if someone would have asked me the question, would you have done it again? I would have said absolutely no. I would not have put myself through that again. If I could go back in time and make a different choice, it would not have been to go into veterinary school. I think now, with being almost 20 years out, my perspective has changed on that. And, I've now at this point, I think if someone asked, I would say, yeah, definitely, I would do it again. But I would love to do it with like the experience and the knowledge that I have now. And I will say it was a quite traumatic experience for me. And there were a couple of layers to that trauma. And probably the first layer was the way in which animals were treated in veterinary school, and the way that veterinary school was just, I'm so sorry, I have a little cat hair stuck to my face.
That would totally happen to me.
Literally happens every time I am on Zoom and I start talking. So it just like kind of floats and just attaches to my face. So there's actually a cat right over there. So so there are a couple of layers to that trauma, I think. And the first layer was the way that animals were treated, and just the way there was just this process of of sort of indoctrination and desensitization that took place in veterinary school. And I mean, this is something that really happened the very first year in anatomy class. And I just, there are just some really horrible memories that I have from our first year anatomy class where when we were doing dissections on a horse, there would basically be this preserved horse on a big rack in the middle of the classroom, and we would all be, looking at various anatomical structures, and just the absolute disrespect for that animal that was not considered to be anything unusual. Like, it was okay to make jokes and take funny pictures, and that just wasn't considered to be unusual at all. And I think one of my first kind of big rude awakenings in veterinary school was when we got our dog to for our dog dissection lab. And when I saw that dog, it was very obvious that dog had not died a good death. Like, I could see it in the facial expression, in the way that the dog had died. And I suspect that these animals were probably these animals were most likely bought either from shelters or from breeding programs and then killed to end up in our anatomy lab. And I think that was kind of like when I saw our dog's face, and students were in pairs, and we were each assigned one animal that we would kind of work through the entire class. So I spent every day with that dog, and just seeing that dog's face, I just knew they didn't die in a good way. And that sort of really stuck in my heart. And I mean, throughout veterinary school, there were many, many instances like that, where it was just like, I had to just stop and think, what are we doing to these animals? And there was also this other thought of, well, I need to get through this, because if I don't get through it, I will never become a veterinarian and I won't be able to help animals. But it really created a very deep mental and emotional conflict, because on some level, you have to question what you're doing that is unethical in order to get to a more ethical place. I mean, I feel like I personally have to question that journey. Like, at what point does doing what you feel is really wrong to get you to a better place where you can do what you feel is right, at what point does that equation just not balance? So there was a lot of that kind of trauma in veterinary school. And there was also a lot of trauma in terms of how students were treated just as not humans, as not having human needs, and things like basic needs like rest and water and food at regular intervals. At least in my school, we were very much treated like cheap or free labor. And we were just not, I guess, just not treated in any way that sort of acknowledged us as human beings. And so that was another kind of layer of the trauma on top of that. And I'll just give one quick example, and then I'll stop talking. But so, for example, I was on my large animal rotations in the large animal hospital, and I worked a 12-hour shift. I'll answer that question in a second. And I worked a 12-hour shift, and then the overnight technician called in sick that night. So basically, after I had already worked 12 hours in the hospital, I was told by the hospital manager that, okay, well, someone is called in sick, one of our staff is called in sick, you have to stay for another 12 hours. So I worked a 20-hour shift, and then could not leave at the end of that shift. I had to stay for morning rounds as well, which was like another hour tacked on top of that. And I actually collapsed during the rounds, fell to the ground. I was just so tired. And that was not uncommon to be worked like that. And it actually put me into some very dangerous situations, because it was very common for students to have to work without any assistance and to just kind of be thrown into situations without any support. So I had situations where, for example, a horse had turned and backed me up against a wall and was about to kick. And if that horse had kicked, I mean, I very well could have been either seriously injured or killed. And, you know, there are just situations like that that occurred. So, and so I saw that someone had asked what school that was. I graduated from Oregon State University. It was kind of an unusual situation because when I was a resident of Oregon, which is why I went to Oregon State, because residential tuition is so much less expensive than going outside of state. So I went to Oregon State, but at the time they did not have a small animal hospital, which meant that they had a cooperative program with Washington State, where I would spend, all of the students from Oregon State would spend about 2 years in Washington, where we would do all of our small animal rotations and all of our small animal clinics and classes and things like that. So it was a little bit unusual. I had the experience of 2 different veterinary schools, and actually I have degrees from both veterinary schools because of that cooperative program. So it was Oregon State and Washington State.
Wow. Your experience through vet school sounds very familiar to me. Well, very much the first part. I feel like I could have absolutely say the same things, how I just felt like so much disrespect for animals that we were practicing on, and that, you know, everybody was laughing and exactly like, do I want to keep doing these so one day I can become a doctor and speak up for animals, but like almost like at the expense of my mental health, because it was being so difficult to like endure, you know, so many hours of work and just seeing these animals. So it's I love asking this question, and your answer just resonated so much with me. And people don't realize how hard it's actually to go to vet school. And I think it depends on the day that I will say people absolutely do not go to vet school. Red, no. But some days I'm in a good mood and I'm like, yeah, sure. So tell me when and how was the moment that you decided to go vegan? What was your aha moment?
Yeah, I just, before I answer that, I just want to respond to what you said about encouraging people to go to veterinary school or not encouraging them. And yeah, I totally get that, because sometimes when I hear someone wants to go to veterinary school, I'm like, are you really sure?
Sure.
But I think we really need diverse students to start going to veterinary school and to start becoming veterinarians. We need students with different mindsets and with different philosophies and different outlooks on life. When I went to veterinary school, the majority of my class were students who had basically gone to college, had gone through an animal sciences program, and then gone right into veterinary school. I was different. That was not the route I took to veterinary school. And I think that that's really important, because when we're talking about this indoctrination and this desensitization, well, it starts in pre-veterinary classes, and it starts in you know, when students are getting their bachelor's degrees before they even apply to veterinary school. And that's because a lot of people think, well, I have to do this animal sciences program in order to get into veterinary school, or, you know, they're told by their advisors that's what they have to do. But one thing that I want to say is that there are different paths and there are different ways to do that. And we actually really, really need students who are going to explore those different paths and get into veterinary school with a different background. So I just want to throw that out there, because I want to say that, you know, it doesn't have to just be one way. And I think if someone is interested in trying to do something different, then we really need those people in the veterinary profession. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And I absolutely 100% agree. I hope if somebody watches this video afterwards and they are interested in something like a different path, maybe like the same that you went, like contact us and, you know, direct them your way. But we definitely need to help others, you know, that's absolutely 100% true. Thank you for adding that, for sure.
Yeah. So if I were you, had just asked me when I became vegan, was that the okay? Um, so that was a long path for me. And I think, like many vegans, probably most that I've spoken to who became vegan at some point in their life and weren't raised that way, I do feel a lot of regret and guilt that I didn't become vegan earlier in life. But
Yes,
it was an evolution for me. It was a long path. So I actually grew up on a pig farm in the Midwest where we raised pastured pigs. We raised what's called feeder pigs, and then we would sell them to feedlots where they would be, the industry term is finished, which means they would be grown to slaughter weight and then they would be slaughtered. So that was the environment that I grew up in. So there was obviously, as I was growing up, I saw a lot of horrible trauma happen to animals. I saw animals in a lot of horrible conditions. But I also was raised in an environment where it was very accepted to use animals for our own, I don't want to say our own good, but for our own purposes, because I don't think using animals does any good for us at all. But for our own purposes, basically, it was something that was very accepted when I was growing up. I was, I think, really fortunate that my mother had a very different idea about things. She was not, she didn't grow up on a farm. She came from Washington, D.C., and kind of ended up on this farm with my father. And she always had a lot of compassion for the animals. So I think I was fortunate, even though I was in this environment, I had this other influence that was teaching me when I was very, very young to start thinking of animals in a different way, even though it took many years for me to evolve from that point where basically I felt sorry for animals, or I felt compassion for animals, but I was like, this is the way of the world, we use them, to the point where I was, realized that I could become vegan and I could embark on a path where I didn't have to use animals. Um, so for quite a while, I played around with being vegetarian and kind of was vegetarian off and on for many years. My first encounter with veganism actually was when I was in college, and someone, I'm not sure it was Vegan Outreach or what organization, but some organization was leafleting on my campus and handed me a leaflet. And that was the first time I had heard of factory farms, because I had grown up on a pastured farm. I didn't know about factory farms really, but I knew other farms in the area that kind of worked off the same model that we did. So that was kind of what I had been exposed to. And so I got this leaflet and I read it, and I remember keeping it on my kitchen table in my tiny little apartment for months. I just left it on the kitchen table. And at that point, I committed to being vegetarian and stayed. I don't know why I couldn't get the concept of like being vegan for some reason. It took a while for me, but I committed to being vegetarian and was vegetarian for many years, was vegetarian all through veterinary school. And it wasn't until, oh gosh, probably like 5 or 6 years after veterinary school that I actually became vegan. And I've been vegan for 11 years now and it's like, I cannot imagine ever going back to a different life. So, but it was an evolution, and, I'm sometimes very sorry that it took so long for me to come to that point, but I did. And I think what I always try to remember too when I'm talking to people is to remember the evolution that I had to go through, and to remember that for everyone, that evolution is going to look a little bit different. But yeah, I wish I had done it sooner. I wish when I talk to people, I could be like, just do it right now. but it takes a while to change
absolutely.
minds. Took a while to change my mind. So yeah.
Yes, I 100% agree. I'm so glad that well, thanks for sharing your journey and that you brought up about the leaflet, because, I volunteer for these organizations, and you're just putting out seeds, on
Mhm.
people's heads. And that was kind of like the beginning of your waking up, to these. It is so amazing that you mentioned that and that you made the connection. And I also wish I figured it, I got my stuff together before, but
Yeah.
it's better than never,
It is, absolutely. And I love that the leafletting is part of my kind of vegan origin story, because I I always want to tell people that and say that, what you're doing is not in vain. And it's absolutely true what you said, Daniela, that it's planting seeds, and you don't know how those are going to grow for the future.
Exactly.
And that's why I love sharing that part of the story, because I want to just build up the people who are out there doing that kind of work,
Yes.
because it does work. It does work. And for me, it's what started me on
Yes,
the specific path toward becoming vegan. So
absolutely. And it's not easy to be a leaf letter. Like, people can be really violent and aggressive against you, and it's really hard. So whoever that superhero leaf letter to you, like, know that you just help a veterinarian go vegan, and that's awesome. So, Ingrid, tell me, what is so far the best, or the favorite part of your career so far?
think that it's so versatile that I've been able to do so many things as a veterinarian. So I've worked in clinical practice, I've worked in emergency practice, I worked in public health as an officer in the Air Force, and that was applying my skills as a veterinarian in a really different way. And I've also worked as a freelance writer, where I've used a lot of my skills and knowledge as a veterinarian to not only write about things like the science behind animal sentience and animal emotions, and bringing more awareness about just the complexity of animals' lives, but also on a more basic level, being able to write informational articles to help people learn more about how better to live with their companion animals and how to take care of their companion animals. So I think that's one thing that I love about it. And that's one reason now, if someone asks me, would you go back and redo veterinary school? I would be like, yes, because I have had so many opportunities open up to me because of my veterinary degree and because of that knowledge and background. And I've been able to do a lot of really diverse things and make a living at them, which is really great.
Yes. It's like our relationship with our career also has kind of like an evolution. Like, right after you finish, you don't know what you're doing, but then you get more comfortable, and then you hate it. And I love this question, because it makes me it makes me love being a veterinarian again, because you guys just inspire me, and, like, I want to do more. Um, so my next question is, I just lost my document. Oh, what is it that inspired you to start writing? Like,
Ooh. Well, I've actually always considered myself a writer, and I've written since I was a child. My first publication was actually when I was 11, when I wrote a poem about a horse and submitted it to a contest and won. So that poem was published in a horse magazine when I was a kid, and that sort of just gave me a taste for it. So I I put a lot of time and effort into becoming a veterinarian and to getting started on that on this career, but I always kind of kept writing off to the side and always thought that I would return to it someday. And so I didn't really see, when I was first going to veterinary school, I didn't really see like a way the two interests could really mesh very well. I think when I was first starting off in veterinary medicine, I didn't realize that there were so many multiple paths that a person can take as a veterinarian. So that was kind of something that occurred when I learned more and kind of grew more in the profession, and then realized there are ways I could bring my writing back in to write about animals, to write about my experience with animals. And then I just kind of went from there. And then When I was in the Air Force, I experienced a disabling injury. And that meant that I could no longer physically do clinical practice. So that was kind of a big life-changing event that, because even though I was in the Air Force doing public health, I always kept in my head, like, I was going to return to clinical practice at some point. You know, I needed a break from it, but I always thought I would always have that option, or I would always go back to it. Well, unfortunately, my injury took away that option. So that was when I really started leaning more heavily on the writing. And that was kind of how I started sort of moving into more of the freelance writing and putting more of my writing out there, publishing more. And that actually ended up leading to a lot of opportunities. Like I had I'm working at a different job now, but when I was working as a freelancer, I had really great opportunities and a lot of work. And it was a great experience, and I think a really fortunate experience to have.
That is such an amazing story about you writing from such a young age. And I'm so sorry about your injury. But I'm glad that you are writing, because I feel one of the best. I mean, there's a lot to be said and educate about veterinary medicine and about animals. I think this is a new era. Animals are getting more and more respect, and after all, that's what I'm fighting. For animals to have the respect that any other living being would, and education is the key. So I'm so thankful for you and what you're doing right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think just based on some of the responses I've had from some of my writings, just really shows that there are people out there who are really open to that and who are open to starting to think about animals in a different way. So that's been really encouraging to me to have those kinds of experiences. I've had some articles that I've published where I've had hundreds of email responses from people who have said this really resonated with me. And so it makes me feel so good to know that there are people out there responding to those kinds of messages.
Yes, I cannot imagine the amount of seeds that you're putting out there in this world. I'm so happy to hear that. Tell me, what is it that you die to tell your colleagues?
I really like this question because if I just had if
everybody was listening,
if I just had like I could just beam into everyone in the veterinary profession. I think the most important thing I would want to say is that we as a profession do not have to be afraid of animal rights. We don't have to be afraid of thinking of animals in a different way, in a more collaborative, in a more equal type of relationship. We don't have to be afraid of this. And I think there are so many groups within veterinary medicine that are really afraid of this, that feel threatened by this. And I think that is the biggest thing that I would want to convey, is that it's a progression in our field. It's only going to make us better if we make this change, and we don't have to be so afraid of it.
Thank you.
That's what I would say.
That is amazing. I love that. It's saying don't see animal rights as enemies. And I think that's what was my answer before when I on my 2 interviews ago. It's definitely, and this dream that I have is about exactly that, just showing other veterinarians we are just like you. We went through vet school, we suffer the same, we all have, but don't be afraid. We're not the enemy, right? We're all we want is for our babies, our patients, to be respected. I love that.
Right. And I think, if we think about what's happening to the world, what's happening to the environment, what is happening to just the ways in which so many people are suffering and oppressed. And I say people, and I'm including more than human people in that as well. So I'm including other animals in that as well. Just the way so many are oppressed and suffering under our current systems. I think this is all related to our attitudes towards animals and our attitudes towards others. And that is one reason why I think it is so important for veterinary medicine to make this progression, because as veterinarians, we are at the center between humans and the more than human world. And I think as a profession, we can do so much to essentially really look at these systems and work on building better systems, not only to save our world, but also to save our communities. So I just think it's just so important that veterinarians get past the fear and start embracing these ideas of how we can create a better, more equitable world with less suffering.
Absolutely. I truly feel we are almost like in charge of it, or it is kind of our responsibility to be the guidance of this movement. I just really hope that everybody wakes up, like, yes, this is our job to do. I love that. So tell me, Ingrid, how do you visualize a future vegan world?
Well, my super cynical answer would be one without humans, but then of course, but I don't mean that. Yeah, that is a really tough one. Because I think if we don't start moving toward a vegan world, a world where we are not farming animals in the way we are, where we're not using animals in the way we are, where we're not degrading the environment in the way that we are. If we don't start moving in a different direction, then, my cynical comment could be the outcome. It may be that as humans, we may not survive. I feel like the planet itself will probably survive, but we may be moving ourselves into extinction with our practices. And I think in order to have a future world, what we're doing right now really needs to change in terms of animal farming, in terms of using the environment, in terms of overfishing, in terms of polluting the oceans. I mean, the list just goes on and on. But what's really difficult is, like, for a question like this, like, you can see what needs to be done. People need to change. They need to, but how do we get there is the question. How do we get there when, for example, meat consumption is actually increasing the world over, and environmental degradation is increasing? And, how do we get there? And I don't have a good answer for that. And I think that's the source of a lot of my frustration, because I know I saw a question earlier from Shreya about balancing the urgency of the situation, the immediacy of the situation, with allowing people to go through their personal evolutions. And really, the truth is that we really are running out of time, and really don't have the time for people to take, I don't know, years or maybe generations to come to bring about this change. So, like I said, I don't have a good answer for that, because I am not sure that individual change is going to do it. I feel like we need systemic change at political levels, at governmental levels, at national and international levels. And that is hard work. I know there are some organizations that are doing some really good work in terms of lobbying in DC, and lobbying the government, trying to make changes to the Farm Bill. I think all of those things are really, in my opinion, on the right track of what we need to be doing, because we need really significant systemic change. And like I said, this change, one-on-one change, is probably not going to be enough.
Yes, I totally agree. And I'm always arguing that with my husband that I don't really see a really future, I don't think the planet is going to be the way that we know it just in our lifetime. And it's one of the, 10,655 reasons why I didn't want to bring any children, because I just cannot imagine leaving anybody in like what is going to happen in 10 years. So
Mhm.
yes, it's easy to visualize like a vegan world, but absolutely, it will actually definitely mean no humans around, because almost every human wants to use animals for their own selfish pleasures or, reasons. So
Yeah.
it makes sense. It's a difficult question, of
Mhm.
course.
It is. And I did actually want to bring up technology as well, because I do think there, I don't think we're going to technologize. That's not even a word. I don't think we're going to use technology to necessarily get us out of this,
Myth.
the crisis of global warming and the crisis of the environment. But I do think technology can be really helpful in moving in that direction. And I don't I mean there's things like cultivated meat coming out and things like that, which would not be considered vegan, but on the other hand would may potentially help move us in that direction. I have kind of really mixed feelings about technology, but I think if it's there and if it's a tool that we can use to start moving away from animal farming, then that may be something useful. I think the biggest concern I have is what truly needs to happen is a mental reframing of our relationship to animals. And I frankly don't see a path forward to do
Hmm.
that, in terms of recognizing the sentience of animals, their right to self-determination, recognizing that we humans are not central.
Hmm.
Rather, we should be part off to the side, part of a circle that is connected to the entire more than human world. So I think we can use tools to improve things, but I'm also really worried that this mental shift will never happen. And
Yes.
sorry, I'm not trying to be like a real downer, but
Well, I do feel that way, honestly. I like this question just because I know there's so many pieces, for this huge puzzle that we want to think of. There's a future and how to guide the future. I feel like having a vision and an idea, even an imagination, I have a lot of imagination, so I like imagine things before they happen so that I can make them happen. But I totally agree with you. And one thing I do tell people when I talk about veganism is that there's mainly three reasons, environmentally reasons, health reasons, and ethical reasons. And to me, the most important by far is the ethical reason, because if everybody gets that and starts being like truly compassionate towards all animals and humans, I just think that it will absolutely like automatically change the world. But yeah, again, I don't think that's gonna happen, because even right now, 2023, we have humans that are not compassionate towards other humans just because they look different. So it's hard to believe that people are really gonna take it serious like that with animals. But it's nice to dream.
well, I love that you mentioned imagination, because one thing that we can definitely say about humans is that we are a hugely imaginative species, which is not just restricted to humans. Other animals exercise their imagination as well. So I don't want that statement to be taken in the sense like humans own imagination or something like that. But we do have this within our skill set. So I feel like if we can get the right people in the right places to start dismantling these systems, we definitely can imagine a better future and create one. It's just getting to the point where the people who are currently in power are no longer in power. So
Right.
that's I think that's a pretty essential step. But yeah, I mean, I think there is hope there in the sense that, you know, we do have the capacity to imagine a better future. It's
Yes,
just that, will we?
absolutely. So what would you want to change from our veterinary oath?
Um,
I can put it on
yeah, I was really happy about, so before 10 years ago, the veterinary oath did not have a reference to animal welfare in it.
mhm.
And that was a change that was made about 10 years ago to the oath, where now the veterinary oath says, you know, we have to take care of animal welfare and also prevent and relieve animal suffering. Those were elements that didn't used to be in the veterinary oath. So I think that is a good sign that those are now present in the veterinary oath. But there's also this statement in the oath about animal resources. We're supposed to safeguard animal resources.
Uh-huh.
And so my concern with this oath is not necessarily so much what it says, although the conservation of animal resources, the intent behind that is basically, you know, animals who are used as food, animals who are used for other purposes. Veterinarians are supposed to be involved in, you know, maintaining those animal populations so that humans can use and, in most cases, kill them. So that's really objectifying towards animals, and so that is one thing that I would change in the oath, to remove that objectification of animals. But my other concern with the way the oath is stated is that it pretty much reflects some of the dichotomies that exist right now in veterinary medicine. And that's the difference in the way that companion animals are looked at and treated, and the way that animals used for food and other purposes like scientific experimentation are treated. And for that, you know, the protection of animal health and welfare and the prevention and relief of animal suffering, those things really only apply to companion animals in
Right.
veterinary medicine. And that's my concern with the oath, is that it reflects that dichotomy. And it sort of also seats that dichotomy really as something really central and basic to veterinary medicine, because the oath is what we take, you know, when we become veterinarians, when we are accepting this commitment to become veterinarians and to care for animals in this way. So it's really like setting this out as the very foundation of veterinary medicine. And that to me is extremely problematic. So I don't know that it's not necessarily a matter of changing the words, but it is changing the kind of the very foundation of veterinary medicine that creates this dichotomy between these so-called different types of animals, which is basically only defined by how they're being used by humans.
Yes, I love your answer. And it's always some good ideas, you know, one day hopefully the world will still be alive. We'll change the oath for future veterinarians, because I do feel like we should be we are in charge, you know, we're the only people that know animal anatomy and how their nerve system works. And why are we not in first line defending all of the veterinarians speaking against ventilation shutdown and declawing and, you know, all these horrible things that we're doing to animals? If we graduated, you know,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just, but yeah, I definitely would love to see an animal centered oath,
absolutely.
you know. And my final question for you is, what is your least favorite part of veterinary medicine, and how do you cope with it?
I have to think about how to answer this diplomatically. So. Okay. Yeah.
You can say alcohol. I mean, that's always my answer. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I think my least favorite part of veterinary medicine is how organized veterinary medicine does not represent the majority of veterinarians, and how organized veterinary medicine is so closely intertwined with animal agriculture, pharmaceutical companies, and really does not represent the interests of the average veterinarian who's working. That's one element that is my least favorite part of veterinary medicine. I don't like the fact that as a veterinarian who has paid membership dues to certain organizations for years, that I don't feel listened to, that I don't have a voice within that organization. And yet they are really prompt about sending out the dues request every year when it's due. So, so I really dislike that part of veterinary medicine. I also, on a really fundamental level, dislike how intertwined veterinary medicine is with animal agriculture and with animal farming, and how unethical that relationship is. And by that, I mean, we have veterinarians, not just organized veterinary organizations, but also individual veterinarians who are invested in propping up this extremely harmful system of animal farming that is not only causing immense suffering to animals, but is also destroying our environment, is also contributing to global warming, is also contributing to issues of food insecurity in other parts of the world, as well as here in the US, is contributing to issues in communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, where oftentimes these farms are situated where they highly pollute the environment and the air and the water. Basically, a system that is that is targeting these communities. And in veterinary medicine, we are upholding all of that. We're upholding all of that, and that really makes me angry. That my profession, my career, and my calling is so intertwined with this, and there's so little reflection or dialogue about it. In fact, any attempt at dialogue about it, any attempt at challenging it, is shut down. And I really dislike that about veterinary medicine.
Yes, that will be enough. I never really thought about it, but yeah, I mean, that way. How do you cope with all these feelings that these situations create on you?
Well, I'm probably gonna have a beer after this, so
it's a lot in our heads, from the individual suffering that we see, like, just by reading. I mean, even reading an abstract, I'm just reading, oh my God, they did what to these dogs to find out this, and all these.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then what you're saying is absolutely true. I've been ignored by this organization, which I've been paying a ton of money every year for the last 11 years, and I'm still part of it. And I'm like, they don't care about anything, about me, So okay, I'm glad to know that we cope the same way, though. Just
right. I mean, that was kind of a joke, but yeah, I think it's definitely good to have some coping mechanisms and some outlets to be able to deal with that. The other thing, just to tack on to that question, I talked mainly about farming and our food system, but there's also the entire biomedical research system that is another thing that veterinary medicine supports that is a very harmful system. And this reliance that we have on using animal models that do not replicate what happens in humans is holding us back from being able to actually get workable treatments for people. So, and again, veterinary medicine is very much entwined in that as well. And so I just wanted to kind of tack that on and mention that, because I've been focusing a lot on food systems through this for this whole hour, but there are also other extremely harmful systems that animals are caught in that are also extremely harmful to humans as well, that unfortunately veterinary medicine as a profession is intertwined with and supportive of. So again,
Yes.
I think as a profession, we need to take a really long, hard look at what we're doing and where we're going, and really start introducing some of these questions into our dialogue and into our discussions.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we are starting, like, I mean, at conferences, we ask these questions. We're talking about them right now, and it's my hope that more people watch these videos and we just plant more seeds. That's really all my hope, and especially in the veterinary community, because again, we hold the power when it talks about animals. You know, the organizations that we are part of are the ones that are basically dictating how these animals, like, or the legislations. You know, like even at the last AVMA conference that we went, we had a presenter talking about how these experiments that we've been doing on mice. Long story was kind of like, actually for the last, you know, how many years we've been experimenting on mice, we just discovered that because of all these environments that have been controlled and really, really stressful for these mice, all these tests have been basically skewed and messed up because these animals have been in such a small places and stress and whole food and all these things. So it was painful to hear, but it's
Yeah.
it at least is starting, and that all the veterinarians that were in that talk, I hope that we all started thinking more about it, you know, and like we are part of the food systems, and fur, and you know, shoes, and leather, and all these products that we don't need to support anymore. And it doesn't mean that our jobs are gonna be gone. It just means that we're gonna have to evolve. We're gonna have to help in a different way society, just by protecting animals, by, you know, it's definitely our profession is in a huge crisis, so we definitely need to figure
Yeah,
creative ways to get out of here, you know, these hard times. And for me, it's always the animals, you know, it's for the animals that
yeah,
we
yeah.
went to vet school for.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's a lack of critical thought and critical dialogue. There's too many people accepting things at face value because this is what they've been told, or this is how we've always done it. And then our organizations don't help with that because they just have an interest in maintaining the status quo. So we really need to start having some of these critical conversations and start challenging what is thought of as the norm for veterinary medicine. And I feel like that can only benefit all levels of veterinary medicine. I mean, right now we have part of our crisis in veterinary medicine is that people cannot get access to care. We have a huge access to care crisis. We have communities that are completely underserved, or we're not serving, or not served at all. And part of that is because we're not reflective thinkers in terms of what is going on with our profession. And, you know, I'm making some blanket statements. I don't mean that to be everyone in veterinary medicine. I'm sort of, you know, talking like trends and stuff like that, because, but you know, part of it is that, part of it is like issues like cultural competency within the veterinary profession. But we really need to start having some of these conversations, or, you know, what I feel is that we're going to lose the trust of the general population. we're going to lose, veterinarians are often thought of as ethical. Well, we're starting to lose that from the
Yes,
population.
I think it's already happening. Absolutely. I mean, social media is not helping us at all, but it's also, you know, absolutely.
We're not
You're
helping
more than right.
ourselves either, though. So,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful for all your answers and everything that you share with us. I'm so glad that that I know all these things from you now. I felt like I really didn't know a lot about you, and I'm just so excited to read more about what you've been writing, and just to keep this connection and this, relationship, and hopefully one day we'll have a big party of vegan veterinarians and conquer the world.
That would be great. Well, now that I like beer, so
okay, we'll conquer the world with beer and
right.
veterinary medicine, educating and veganizing the world.
Right.
Let me see if we have any questions. I think Zrija have one. How would you advise well-meaning folks who pay for their membership to veterinary organizations take effective measures to change policies within those organizations?
That's a hard one, because if they won't listen to us, then it's and if they're actively shutting down the ability to have a dialogue with them, then that gets really difficult. I mean, there are avenues like commenting on policies, writing letters, going to conferences, things like, I mean, all the things that our honor has been doing, but that gets really challenging if that is just shut down. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I think that the path forward may not be through our current national organization. I think that we may want to look and see if there are other organizations that are cropping up that can do the kind of work that our national organization is failing to do for us.
Yes. Did you have to say anything, Crystal? You wanted to add anything?
I mean, yeah, I go back and forth on like how legitimate is it to keep paying the AVMA when they keep shutting us down, but at least we have a voice. At least I could comment on the humane slaughter guidelines. At least it looks like some of our people got on the new panel on depopulation, so that's good. We can all send letters to our delegates 45 days before the House of Delegates meeting, before the convention. I encourage more people to come to the convention. It's great when we have a group of people with us in those rooms. We could always set up meetings with our leaders there. But we got to get organized too. I mean, it's me and Daniela right now going to the AVMA convention. Nobody else is going, it seems like. And I hope that I see more people there, and more people are like, yes, we want to join you. We want to, take action together. But as long as we're the only ones there, we can only do so much. And then I think influencing them from the outside with op-eds and letters to the editor and the media, talking to journalists. Seems like I am the only one out there doing that. I'd really wish some of our bigger animal rights organizations like PETA, ALDF, HSUS, ASPCA would help us in getting more media attention, but it is what it is. I really hope, by me talking more, by our honor getting out there more, we'll make the rest of the animal protection movement see how important veterinarians are in their cause, and hopefully more animal protection people will start addressing these conventions and start addressing their state VMAs and leafleting at vet clinics and passing out handouts to vet clinics and all of that. I think there is a path forward, but it's really sad that both the animal protection movement and veterinarians are both not engaged in this discussion. So that's my deal.
Well, I hope we can get more engagement, and I hope somebody else join us, Crystal. Otherwise, we'll just have to party together, but it'll be fine. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for accepting this, sharing all your experiences and your thoughts, amazing thoughts that are definitely giving me a lot to chew on my head. But I love this, and I really appreciate that you were here tonight. And everybody, thank you so much for coming. And I'll see you in about 2 weeks for our next interview with our next vegan veterinarian friend. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.